Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Moore and I will be talking about the potential for energy from algae. Now, biomass used for energy is no new concept to people. People have been using biomass for energy for millennia, really as long as civilization has existed. We used to burn wood as our main source of energy. This would be used to heat homes, to cook, really anything we'd use. Fossil fuels for today would be used by biomass back in the day. This really didn't switch until pretty recently. This was sort of the turn of the 20th century, late 19th, early 20th centuries in the United States. It was a little earlier in Great Britain, but that's when we really started to use fossil fuels for energy. With that came a lot more urbanization, more factories, more textile mills, really anything like that. And really, biomass is only used primarily by poor countries today, like Haiti, where they don't have access to things like coal and oil like we do. Now, this is a coal smokestack, which became pretty commonplace around the turn of the 20th century. This was when we really started using fossil fuels for energy rather than biomass. These were seen as much better than biomass because they could be used, or they could be bought much cheaper for how much energy they yielded, and they produced a lot more energy than wood could. They could power an entire city versus wood, which could maybe power a home, maybe a few homes if you had enough of it. So people really started turning over to fossil fuels to power things around the turn of the 20th century. And it wasn't until the mid-1900s that people really started realizing that fossil fuels are harming the environment quite a bit. And they have a lot of negative impacts. They are non-renewable, so we are going to run out of fossil fuels at some point. A non-renewable resource is anything that cannot be recycled within a person's lifetime. And these things take millions of years sometimes to develop. And obviously that's completely non-renewable. We're going to run out at some point if we keep using them at the level we are currently. And B, they harm the environment. They release a lot of pollutants. Using the example of coal, coal releases carbon dioxide into the air, which is a greenhouse gas. This causes a heightened greenhouse effect. This causes the Earth to warm. That has a lot of negative impacts there. The global ice caps can melt, making the sea level rise, among many other things. The weather can become more disastrous than it was before. And it also releases things like sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide is what causes acid rain, and acid rain is a big problem in anywhere that burns coal primarily as their energy source. You see it a lot in the northeastern United States, kind of on the Pacific coast of China, places like that. ExxonMobil is an American company. They're based out of Texas. I'm sure all of you have heard of ExxonMobil. They're the largest energy company in the U.S. They're actually number 2 on the Fortune 500 list, behind only Walmart, because of course Walmart is the biggest, because it's Walmart. But ExxonMobil has led the industry, especially in oil, crude oil, and gasoline production, distribution of gasoline around the world, and especially in the United States. I mean, there are gas stations that are Exxon or Mobil all over the place, even in our little area. They have had a lot of criticism from environmental groups over the years. They tend to be pretty right-wing and conservative versus environmentalists who are pretty left-wing, so they butt heads both politically and on the issue of energy. You actually have quite a bit of political influence by ExxonMobil. The former CEO, Rex Tillerson, is actually the Secretary of State in President Trump's cabinet currently. So they clearly have quite a bit of influence. They've been criticized for especially their distribution of oil and gasoline around the country, and around the world, which is non-renewable and causes a great amount of pollution in those areas, but also for things such as the Exxon Valdez oil spill that was up in Alaska in 1989, and that's really when people started to see that ExxonMobil needed to kind of change its ways to be viewed better in the public eye. So in response to this, they began to look into harvesting algae, actually, to produce energy. Now, algae is something we see on a pretty regular basis, I think. It's in many ponds around the Cary-Raleigh Apex area. And it's not something you really want to see. It looks pretty dirty, tends to come with a lot of bugs, it smells bad. It's not something you want in your neighborhood or anything like that, but it is very useful when it comes to energy. Now, scientists in ExxonMobil and who work for the U.S. government and for smaller companies have looked into algae as a way to make energy more renewable and cleaner and more sustainable in general for the future. The way that workers at ExxonMobil, people looking into this sort of algae industry, have planned on producing energy from algae is through the use of lipids, which make up a good part of algae, makes up almost half of the natural compounds within an algae cell. Algae versus other plants is very small. Other plants like a tree or a flower would grow a lot larger than just some algae will. That tends to be either a microcelled organism or very few cells within one algae organism. And they contain a good amount of lipids. So if you compile them enough, they reproduce very quickly. You can actually harvest the lipids, which is kind of a fancy way to say fat or oil, which is kind of already what we use anyway. We use crude oil, which comes predominantly from the Middle East, also from some places in the U.S., such as Texas or Alaska. And if you compile enough of these lipids, then you can actually produce enough energy to hopefully run a vehicle. That's kind of what what scientists are looking into at this point. And the way they do this is through the use of algae farms. And an algae farm is a place where they have man-made pools that they fill with algae organisms, and they allow them to reproduce. They move around the water to stimulate growth in the algae, and then they send it into a lab where the lipids are then taken out of the algae and tested to see if they can be used in something like a car or a truck, something we'd use crude oil for today. Now, as of yet, the studies that have gone into algal energy have been successful in small operations, but they haven't been able to power a vehicle or anything of that nature. Yet they've been able to power small things, create small amounts of energy. But this is actually a way that people are looking that we can make energy more renewable for the future. Now you might say burning or using more oil for energy, that just causes more negative impacts. That's not changing anything. It's just making it more expensive. Now that's not the case. Algae is a photosynthetic organism. It's a plant. So they actually take in carbon dioxide in their photosynthetic reaction, in their production of oxygen and sugar. This takes out something that is a major issue with oil, in that it creates an exorbitant amount of carbon dioxide, causing climate change mainly. And in the end, the use of algae for energy almost completely zeroes out, which is far different from the use of crude oil or gasoline, which releases a great amount of CO2 into the atmosphere and takes in little to none. And so this is, in general, a way that scientists are hoping for the future, that we can use our surroundings, we can use biomass, to make energy more renewable, make our world more sustainable, and to limit things like climate change and pollution. Thank you for your time.